So here's what I'm looking at as we speak, which this caught my eye this weekend. The headline in the New York Times reads, U.S. government to take cut of NVIDIA and AMD AI chip sales to China. And it's then the subheading, in a highly unusual arrangement with President Trump, the companies are expected to kick 15% of what they make in China to the U.S. government. Now, we can get into the details of this, but one of the things that struck me about this was it's a really highly unusual, because I'm expected to kick a percentage of what I make to the U.S. government. Nobody thinks that's unusual. They just call it taxation. So why is there something I'm missing about this that is in fact highly unusual and is a form of a kicking back of 15%? Do I get this wrong?
Not at all. I think you get it right. But I want to put it in a historical context, because part of me, I have to admit, enjoys pointing out to people that the Republican Party, of which Mr. Trump is now the titular head, that the Republican Party has been a party which for most of the last century has prided itself on saying we are the party of no taxes or low taxes or cutting taxes or maybe even all three. And never before have they been more in violation of that tradition than they are with this announcement that you just memorized. It's just, I find that the remarkable thing. Tariffs, are a kind of tax. And for the last 6 months, we've had a spectacular show of a man who seems to be barely aware of what they are and how they work, but flinging them around with a kind of gusto and bravado, which clearly the MAGA base enjoys watching. It's on again, it's off again. We'll smite you in Canada and we'll do this to you in Mexico, and on and on and on. But this is new. Now we're going to tax exports. Tariffs are taxes on imports. Notice the government is taxing all over the place. The Republican government is taxing new taxes, growing taxes, big taxes, taxes on things we didn't tax before. We haven't taxed exports, although that's not new in the world. That has existed for a long time. So I'm struck by this explosion of taxes. And where is the business community complaining? Well, they dare not, because here's the game that's emerging. Mr. Trump will use the government to help create a market if and only if you pay the government a fee for developing your market. You see, it wasn't clear that those chips that will now have to pay 15% had any market in China. You see, the game goes like this. The United States threatens China. China retaliates because they're not going to allow, and they don't need to anymore, the United States to dictate to them. That's become a European specialty, but China not going to allow it. So then China will close the market for those kinds of chips, make the chips themselves. They've shown that they can do it. Oh my God, this is not good for the chip companies that were planning to export their particular chips to China. Oh, but say the neocons, you can't send those chips to China because that'll help them produce better chips. And among other things, the next generation of chips. So we don't want you to do it. How is Mr. Trump going to resolve it? The way a businessman thinks. Make money off of it. resolve the problem. Okay, yeah, we're helping them a little, but we're making money. You know what it reminds me of? The old joke that capitalists are people who will buy. How's it go again? They'll sell to the hangman the noose with which he hangs the capitalist. In other words, to make money,
Right.
literally destroy themselves. Here we go. And here's the last point I would stress. This is another step in what I enjoy calling copying China. The difference between China and the United States right now is, above all, the fact that the United States is a private capitalist economic system with considerable government intervention, whereas China is a hybrid, roughly half private, half public. And that system, the hybrid, has grown much faster than the private system here. And what we're watching is copycat. We're watching the grudging, inexplicit copying. The government is being given a bigger and bigger role here. It's against everything. Let me be a professional economist for a minute, a product of the American fancy system. And you remember, right? I went to all the right fancy universities. I learned my economics at Harvard, Stanford, and Yale, supposed to be the top of the heap. And they told us over and over again, oh, private sector, that's efficient. Private sector, that's the best way to go. Private sector is why the United States is dominant. How embarrassing for them now that the Chinese can say private schmivate. It's the combination of private and state that has outperformed your private sector. And you can keep your private sector. We are catching up and we're about to surpass you. And nothing supports that so much as now saying, having spent 6 months taxing imports, he's going to expand the tax program and tax exports as well.
A couple thoughts about all of this, because first of all, there's the media dimension of it. The fact that the New York Times, one thinks one gets the impression you need to have gone to college or something in order to write for the New York Times on economic matters, and yet they basically just accept the spin from the White House that this is highly unusual, which to me is not only lazy journalism, but it obscures an important point. The first part of the point is what you said, that this is, in fact, a form of taxation. And the second part of the point is, then who's the ultimate end payer of the taxation? Sure, maybe these companies will absorb some of the cost of this new tax themselves, and some will be in their export, Chinese exports to other countries of electronic equipment, computers, and so on. Some of it, I would assume, is coming back to the American consumer. You got all this talk about this highly unusual, all that language kind of obscures that fact. And you touched on something that I've been trying to articulate, and you expressed it well. When I first read this, there was something that felt like a kind of a crossing of a Rubicon about it. And it's not that taxation is anything new, and I got right away that it was, a form of tax. But you mentioned that, the Chinese have a hybrid system. This country for many years has lacked anything like a coherent industrial policy, because we have not only a private sector, but a private sector biased ideology that says, of both parties, but especially Republicans, saying, stay out of trying to control or manage things. As you point out, the Chinese hybrid system, which is definitely managed by the government, is doing much better. Now we've got not only the Republicans reversing themselves, as in it was Trump in 2018 with his tax bill, who cut the statutory corporate rate from 35% to 21%. That's a 14-point cut. Now, for these companies doing this kind of business in China, he's added 15%. So it's like he's undone his own tax bill. But more importantly, he's doing it towards some kind of presumably targeted end, that this is either to make it less profitable to trade with the Chinese, or to maybe he hasn't even thought it through that far. Maybe it's just to increase government influence over the decision making in the boardrooms of these kinds of companies. But whatever it is, it starts to look more and more like it might be some kind of even accidental industrial policy being formed despite their ideology. Do you get what I'm driving at?
Absolutely, but I would push you very hard on this one, Richard. You're getting at it, but don't stop. Keep right on going, because that's what this is. When you create a regime like this with tariffs, taxing your imports with tariffs, taxing your exports, calling it sharing with that, whatever you want. It's like all that stuff about the sharing economy. We were supposed to believe that Uber and Lyft represented, hippies doing business.
Right.
The reality here is bribery. Every business now goes to Washington the way every country does, trying to negotiate the best deal they can. And the government is basically saying, although heaven forbid we should say this in English, the government is basically saying, how much is it worth to you? You want me to lower your tariffs? Give me something.
Right.
But that's not enough. Give me more. And now you have exporters coming, not just importers coming with that language, but exporters. American exporters are now going to go. You can imagine every businessman or woman in America reading that New York Times study saying, oh my goodness, am I going to be visited by someone from Washington who's going to be coming and telling me we want 15% of what you export to wherever? And if you say no, they say, well, we're not going to put much pressure on that country to take it. Let me put this another way. One of the lessons of modern economics, whether you're a Marxist or a non-Marxist, it doesn't really matter. One of the lessons is we are more interconnected than we have ever been. Whether it's the jet engine that makes us physically close to one another, or it's the internet that allows me to look into the factory floor in Shanghai as easily as I do it in Sheboygan. The reality is, well, one of the other realities is pricing. When you start mucking around in the price system, whether you're a government or a private agency, it begins to have a life of its own. And you never know what they all are, all the different ways other businesses will react to the change of a price over here. For example, nothing is as common as companies raising their prices when they can use the excuse of some government policy.
Right.
This makes it easier. Otherwise, they'd have to face the reality, which somewhere all Americans know, that if the price goes up, we all know who raised it. It's the employer who raises price. Employees don't set prices. Governments don't set prices. Businesses set prices. Don't be ideologically retarded here. The question is then, why would a business choose to raise or lower or leave the same a price? And if they choose to raise it, they're not stupid. They have long ago understood that they will lose customers unless they can make a good public case that it's not them that are making that decision, it is forced on them by it's like the self-defense in a criminal case. If you can force the other guy had a gun at your head when you did your bad act, well, then you can get out of it. So what do the employers tell us? I'm only raising prices because the government had a tariff, or the government changed the rules, or the government changed that's all we hear. Businesses repeat their ideology to us as if it explained the world. So then we end up agreeing with their ideology, and then we're all just being mystified into paying more. And that's what's going on. There is no way for the government to control all of the consequences of what they are doing. And the more the government intervenes, the more it learns that lesson. And the reason China is doing well is they didn't have to learn the lesson ideologically obfuscated. It is their ideology to have the government step in massively all the time. Okay, well, then the issue is resolved because they're not self-deluded the way we are here.
And, whenever I look at some of these things, people always talk about your prosecutors, cui bono, who benefits. I also like to look at, what would it be in Latin, cui dolet or something, who gets hurt, right? And you're right, I think, absolutely right, that Trump, he's doing something very different in running government like a business and saying exactly what you said, which, I've heard in meeting rooms, dozens of times. I'm like, okay, what are you going to give me for that? He's saying that on behalf of the government. But one of the things that frustrates me about our American conversation about these types of issues is they say, oh, well, China, here's an example very relevant to this discussion since we're talking about chips for AI. If China gets ahead in the AI race, it's bad for America. Well, which America are we talking about here? Are we talking about the C-suite of NVIDIA? Are we talking about Larry Ellison? Who the hell are we talking about here? Because what's good for those guys might be bad for everybody else. And this, to me, is a perfect example of that. So Trump is driving a hard bargain. He's going to get more government revenue, a little bit more. It's not going to be much in the grand scheme of things, but he's going to use it, I will bet you, to justify for retaining and amplifying his tax cuts, which were heavily skewed toward the wealthy. So not only are working people whom it hurts, having to pay more. I mean, everybody will have to pay more for things that, depend on these chips, but it will matter to working income people. Not only will they have to pay more, but it's part of a master plan where government really is acting like business. It's screwing you. Tell me I've got that wrong.
No, you've got that right. I only started smiling because in the financial press already, there is speculation that the explanation for this particular story is actually very particular, even though the implications are exactly what we've been talking about. But here's the speculation, because it in a way it makes your point already. Here's how it goes. Mr. Trump wants to hit China with a set of tariffs. The Chinese say back to him, okay, you do that, we're going to hit you with these tariffs. Those tariffs destroy the market in China for the products of NVIDIA and AMD. Now Mr. Trump says, oh, I don't want you to do that. Oh, why don't you want me to do that? Well, the companies are saying, this will kill us. We're NVIDIA, we're AMD. We expected, we made investments assuming the Chinese, the single most important market we have, will be buying these chips from us for years. And you can't do that. It crumbles us. And, we are two of the most important economies holding up the stock market right now, which is true. I mean, NVIDIA alone accounts for half of the growth the stock market has had in the last 5 years. So what is Mr. Trump going to do? He doesn't want there to be a retaliation.
Okay.
That done. Answer. I'm going to make a special case, which he had already done. I'm going to carve out that chips will exclude. But he can't be seen as doing this to pander to China. So now he comes up with, you're going to give me 15%. Now it looks like I'm the clever businessman getting 15% out of you, when the real issue is now I cannot do a tariff on China to avoid their retaliation, which would have hurt you. But I can't be seen as doing it because it would have hurt you. I'm seen as doing it because it raises money for the United States.
And there's another, I have to bring this up before we go much further, just because, we're talking about the principles involved and broader implications, but just as a case study, there have just been too many instances where these kinds of announcements, not like this specifically, but these announcements about the corporations are going to pay have been made in the United States. But if you look at their books, 2 years from now, they've gotten an awful lot of breaks and concessions. And look at that. It comes out to about 16, 17%. They actually came out a little ahead. So we can't be sure that's not going to happen here too. But to me, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he didn't cross a Rubicon here. But to me, it's kind of like an analogy is what happened after the 2008 financial crisis. Got to save the auto industry or the entire economy is doomed. Got to save AIG from going down because the ripple effects would be, massive. So lo and behold, the US government discovers it has the magical ability to take over a company and run it itself. So it does it with AIG. It does it even more directly with the auto industry, but is so terrified of, the Obama administration is so terrified of the implications of that from the minute they begin, all they can talk about is how quickly they're going to turn it back to the private sector, the same private sector that didn't prepare for contingencies like the one we experienced, which they, of course, dutifully did. And yet, so we crossed the Rubicon there, and, everybody was so eager to forget it that, oh, no, we're not going to take over or break up Chase Bank. Oh, no, we're not going to take over Boeing. Oh, no, we're not going to take over any of these other companies. So maybe what's happening here is just going to be another sort of pulling a card out of his sleeve from, the card sharp Donald Trump. I don't know, but it seems to me, even if the media tries to bury it, that we should know that, look, you can have industrial policy. You can make choices based on broader issues. You can, in fact, Trump's doing it right and left. He's radically remaking the economy with his tariffs, it seems to me. And just as you can nationalize companies or take over failing companies on the part of the government, you want to take 15% off the cost of an NVIDIA chip, nationalize it, and then you don't have to make a profit margin or pay your executives their fancy packages. There's your 15% right there, easy. So it seems to me like this deliberate process of ideologically driven I think you use the word amnesia coming in, but this sort of, I forget what that term is when you can't remember anything minute to minute, but that is underway here. And as a kind of, I feel as if it's incumbent on people like you and your position, me and my position, say, hey, no, wait a minute. There's a lesson here that we all need to take to heart.
Yeah, and if you know something about economic history, this is all very old. I mean, let me give you an example from the sanctions against Russia. Russia has more sanctions against it than the rest of the world combined, and going back to 2014, if not earlier. Uh, Here's one of the basic sanctions: the West will not buy oil and gas from you, and so will destroy your export market. And the Russians laugh and they say, okay, but you will buy from, I don't know, Indonesia. Yes. You'll buy from Pakistan. Yes. You'll buy from Nigeria. Yes. Okay. We'll send the oil to Nigeria, take it out of one ship, put it in another ship, and then ship it to you.
Right.
And then there's no problem because it's Nigeria. This is childish. Let me give you an example. If you have to pay 15% of your exports of chips to China, I got a clue. Here's an idea. Don't ship it to China. Ship it to Vietnam.
Right.
Vietnam just agreed to a 0% tariff. Oh boy. So you ship them to Vietnam, cost you absolutely nothing, and thereby you don't pay anything to Uncle Sam. Mr. Trump can have it to there, he can show it. I'm charging 15%. And suddenly there'll be no revenue flow because everybody's evading in the tried and true mechanism. There are warehouses that have been built in the ports around the world that do nothing but do what's called transshipment. They move the crap from one cargo hold to another cargo hold. Or if they're even more creative, crooked, here's what they do. They bring a chip wrapped in a box. They have someone locally make a red line on the outer part of the box. So it's been further processed. So now it's a processed chip. This is a joke. And then it is sent to China. China gets the chip. NVIDIA gets the export. And Uncle Sam gets nothing. That's how that works.
And I hear they have a very nice railway line in Vietnam that goes straight into China. You can just throw those chips on there. They get there in no time.
The container that holds it, never shakes.
Right in those big square things that look like box cars. Yeah, you just takes the crane, unloads it, goes straight up there. So is there a big takeaway from all this? Or in my favorite ending to one of the Simpsons episodes, someone asks Homer Simpson, what's the moral of this? He says, there's no moral. It's just a bunch of stuff that happened. So is there a moral to this, or is this just a bunch of stuff that's happening?
I think there's a moral to this. And I think the moral is what you're watching should be understood as political economic theater.
Mm.
It's a theater to make things look as though they're moving ahead in a reasonable way. They aren't. It's easy to do what we've been doing. We only began by poking holes in a few of these things. They're all full of holes.
Mm.
All these tariffs, I think we've done it before, but very briefly. The 100% tariff on the BYD electric cars and trucks. I keep reverting to that example because it's so dramatic. It means that an American can only buy a BYD $30,000 vehicle by paying $60,000, $30,000 to get the vehicle, and 100% equivalent tax Uncle Sam gets. So that costs me $60,000. My competitors located whenever I produce, batteries or cars.
Yep. I just lost your audio. Can you hear me? Yeah, I don't know which. Oh, say something now.
Okay.
You're
Can you?
back. Yeah, there is some connection problem.
All right. Very quickly again. So you pay 60,000 here because it's 30,000 for the car and 30,000 100% tariff that exists right now against Chinese electric vehicles. Okay. So that means if I'm a producer of, I don't know, electric shavers, who cares? I need to have cars and trucks as part of my business. Can I get the best quality, lowest price? No. I'd have to pay 60 grand. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy a cheaper electric car or truck from Tesla or GM or somebody, Toyota, and it's not going to be as good. I'm going to pay more and get less. You know what that means? I am competitively at a disadvantage. So when you put 100% tariff, you make a big public relations. And the New York Times has a headline, big tariff against the Chinese. And you have the Sean Fain, whom I admire,
Mm-hmm.
stand up and say how grateful he is that auto workers in Detroit and so on have been protected. And they have been. But they've been protected at the price of countless other Americans who are going to lose their livelihood because their employer can't compete.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't, you have to multiply. This is the first lesson you teach in a course in economic trade, international trade, which I've done. You teach people the complex effects, like I mentioned earlier. One price leads to the change of another. You have to do that. Otherwise, your statement about the outcome is total bullshit. You don't know that. And
right.
here in this situation, there's easy examples of how this is going to hurt, which you haven't taken into account. So your theatric is one of protecting our jobs, but you're actually rendering our jobs vulnerable. You're losing people their job. May take a little while to play out, but that's what the reality is. Just like escaping the sanctions or escaping the tariffs is part of why those things so often don't work.
And and protecting, I like Sean Fain too, the union auto worker union leader, but protecting his workers, any indirect subsidy that goes to them, which is what we're talking about, is a subsidy from consumers, has got to be filtered through the profit taking, uh, you know, layer of excess fat that is the executive class of these overpaid executive class of these companies. So it's not like it's going straight to those guys anyway, those men and women on the line. It's getting, it's a lot of it's getting taken off the top, which is something that never gets discussed in this. I get why Sean Fain can't talk about it. He's got to negotiate with those people, but the fact that we don't have a political party in this country that's, for example, the 100% tax on the electric cars was put in by Joe Biden, just as a note. So we don't have a political party in this country that was, hey, you know what? There's got to be a way to help other workers without these people skimming so much off the top in a ridiculously unequal economy. Well, that's just throwing that out there. Call me names if you want, but I'm just throwing.
Not only that, your mentioning of the third party makes me recommend something for you and me to discuss next time we have a program.
Okay.
That's happening in Britain. Jeremy Corbyn,
oh yeah, mm-hmm.
and a member of the Labour Party in the Parliament, Sultana, I forget her first name, but they've started a new party. They haven't even come up with the name because they want that to be determined. But they did open registration for people to join.
Yeah.
And 300,000 people joined in the first week. And this is unbelievable. And we ought to talk, I think, about whether and to what extent that is or isn't a model for the United States.
We should talk about that. It's time. So
Yeah.
let's put that on our list.
We depend on your support here at the 0 Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.